I can summarize my resume with a single phrase, which is that I'm an advocate for individual rights. That's what I concern myself with. I believe that government is constituted for a single purpose, and that is the protection of other people's rights. And unfortunately, history and the current world stage shows us many examples where government actually violates individual rights and becomes the very thing that it's constituted to protect us from. And that is one of the things, or an example of that, that we talked about today, with supposed anti-bullying. So there's one thing that I can tell on each of you, just by virtue of the fact that you're here today, and that is that you obviously don't care about children, right? I know that because you have the audacity to question the inherent, obvious benevolence of something called an anti-bullying bill. And only somebody who is for bullying could possibly question the wisdom of something called an anti-bullying bill, right? Now, of course, that's the narrative that you're going to run into as you publicly oppose this if you choose to do so. And it's interesting that that's a tactic that people choose to use, that opponents of this thing choose to use. Because what that is, what you might recognize that as, if you are, like me, a fan of logic, is that's a fallacy. It's a particular kind of fallacy called an argument from intimidation. Intimidation is something that I would classify underneath the heading of bullying. So you're actually using bullying in order to promote your anti-bullying bill. Fascinating. Of course, it makes sense because when you look at the actual substance of what this anti-bullying bill is and what it does and where it comes from, it's established for the purpose of bullying, for the purpose of bullying people for who they are, what they believe, and how they choose to express themselves. So let's delve into that. Why a bullying bill? Why now? Why in 2014 are we talking about bullying? Minnesota has been a state for around 155 years. Are we really to believe that we are just now getting around to doing something about the scourge of bullying in our schools? That we've just tolerated abuse up to this point? That we've had nothing to say whatsoever or no action taken against the harm that our children are being inflicted on a daily basis in their schools?
More control over the children.
It's more control over the children. That's what it's all about. It's more control over us. It's more control over everybody. What is bullying? What comes to mind? And feel free to shout it out when I say the word bullying. What do you think of? What images come up?
Hate.
Obama.
Intimidation. Intimidation. What form does that take? How would you know that I'm intimidated? What would I have to do?
Traditionally, name calling.
Name calling, okay.
But you're a big guy. If I was walking down the street and it was dark and I was alone,
Sure.
I would be intimidated. I
Okay.
would say that you were bullying me,
Right.
but your appearance, just being a man and me being a woman alone.
Sure, okay.
But really?
In the context of school, how do you as a teacher, as a lunch volunteer, as a teacher's assistant, how would you recognize that one student is bullying another student?
You're silencing them.
Silencing them?
Some form of threat.
Some form of threat. What does a threat look like?
Could be physical, could be verbal.
Psychological.
Making them be afraid. For fear.
Yeah, but anything, you can be afraid of anything. Like me saying, if I was walking alone down a dark street and he passed by, I would be intimidated. You can't judge by that.
Let me propose something, and you can tell me if you agree with it or not. We're talking about conduct. We're talking about actions. If in order for me to bully another person, I have to do something, right? To approach them physically, tower over them, punch them, hit them, kick them, steal from them, speak out of turn, call them a name, what have you. That's conduct. And we have an existing process for dealing with conduct. If a teacher sees those actions, that conduct in the classroom, they're gonna do something about it today, right? So what's changed? What's different? Why do we need a new bill? Why do we need to revisit this question?
The way I see it is you got an act of aggression and maybe the other kid stands up and pops the other one in the nose. Let's say one kid's grabbing one kid by the ear and he says, "Stop it." And yet he don't stop and he keeps grabbing him by the ear and the other kid stands up and pops him. That's called force. You see, everybody has the right to protect themselves, right? While the aggressor, who's the perpetrator, would not stop. So a lot of teachers run back there and say, "Well, what happened?" "Well, he's grabbed my ear, so I popped him one." And they say, "Well, two wrongs don't make it right." Well, that's not really true, because there's only one wrong committed, and the other one chose force to make it stop.
So your example points out a lot of interesting things. First of all, we're talking about conduct again. The pulling of the ears is conduct, the popping them in response is conduct. There's an initiation of force, there's a retaliation of force, right?
No, it's not really force. The first one wasn't force, that was aggression.
The semantics being what they are, you're responding to force, right?
Right.
But we're getting into the weeds. The important thing is we're talking about conduct, and when the teacher's responding, whatever individual judgment they bring to that situation, they're responding to conduct, they make it with conduct. What did you do? Stop doing that. Here's the punishment. Understand that you can't do that again. Let's go on and live our lives, right? So what's changed? What's different?
The internet.
The internet has changed the form, but it hasn't changed the nature of what bullying is.
Aren't they claiming the suicides? No.
What's that?
Aren't they claiming that the suicides are a reason that they have to do something?
The suicides are being used as a tool to promote the idea that something new needs to be done, right? So what's the new thing that needs to be done?
Isn't this whole bullying thing about a new definition of bullying, which really
Yes.
isn't bullying?
Exactly, and that's it exactly. They're trying to change two things. They're trying to change, that's a huge motivator, yes. They're trying to change what bullying is, what we consider bullying to be under the law, and they're trying to change how we respond to it. They're trying to change the definition toward a very particular purpose. If you go and you look at the Prevention of School Bullying Task Force report, which is a report that came out of a group put together by executive order of Governor Mark Dayton, they're not shy about it. It's not a conspiracy. They're very proud of the fact that their objective, their aim, is to change values and attitudes. That's the purpose, to change values and attitudes. Now, on the surface, that may not sound like too horrible of a thing. Obviously, if a kid is tugging on your ear, he might need his values and attitudes adjusted, right? But why is it particularly problematic when we talk about government acting to change values and attitudes?
Who decides what you change it to?
What is government? What distinguishes government from every other institution in human endeavor is its capacity to use force, its capacity to respond with force. I can't legally do that unless it's a self-defense scenario, right? But I can't decide, I can't be an arbiter or vigilante and say, well, Mark robbed Billy, so I'm going to go over with my shotgun and deal with Mark. I don't have that right. Government does. Government has the unique ability to respond with force. And so whenever you hear anybody talk about government action, whenever you see somebody wringing their hands talking about how something has to be done in the context of a bill that needs to be passed, what they are saying is that force needs to be used. What they are saying is, I'm going to take my shotgun and go deal with Mark. Now, that's particularly problematic in an arena or with the endeavor, the goal of trying to change values and attitudes, because what are values and attitudes? It's who I am. It's what I think. It's my expression. We're talking about the police of thought. That's what this is. Very cleverly and theatrically masked as a benevolent effort to help the children. It's the police of thought. It's what they couldn't do with hate speech laws just outright at the federal level and state level. So now they're trying to implement it in a very clever new fashion through the school system. The response to this new definition of bullying, which includes, by the way, anything that anybody finds offensive, right? So let's consider, we got a sign up here on the wall, right? Rules. These are the things you shall not do. You shall not hit. You shall not kick. You shall not steal. You shall not speak out of turn. You shall not offend somebody. What? I can plan my day to avoid hitting, kicking, stealing. I can jump through those hoops with minimum difficulty. How do I plan my day in such a fashion that I don't offend somebody? What if they're particularly sensitive? What's that?
It's the subjective nature of the additions they want to make to the bills that move it from concrete to subjective definitions that make it impossible to enforce in an even-handed way.
I would add intentionally.
Yeah.
They don't want it to be even-handed.
Yeah.
This is an effort to impose a very particular kind of socialization upon our children, to change the values and attitudes that we instill in them at home and in our houses of worship into those which they want. It's a process called formative discipline. And you can read about that in the task force report. And I believe it's referenced in the bill itself, formative discipline. We're going to form your little nub of clay called a student into what we want. There's a process that's used in one of the schools today that utilizes a form where the student has to fill in the blank of this sentence. I used to think blank, but now I know blank. I used to think I have a mommy and a daddy. Now I know it's okay to have two mommies, two daddies. Right? Now, maybe it is. I don't know. But whose job is it to instill that value? Is it the state's? Is it Senator Scott Dibble's? Is it Governor Mark Dayton? And is that something, our values, our attitudes, are the things that we think and feel, the aspects of our being which define our individuality, are these things which should be subject to the shotgun? Or should they be subject to choice, rationality, individualism, liberty? That's the question. What this bill does is it sets up a vast new state bureaucracy called the School Climate Center, which would exist within the Department of Education. It would be controlled by a new group of appointed folks called the School Climate Council. They'd be appointed by the governor. And their job would be to decide what are the values and attitudes we are going to promote and how are we going to promote them. It's going to take power away, discretion away from students, of course, but also teachers, parents, everybody involved in the education system. The janitor is going to have to get diversity training on any of these things, which leads to one of the major problems with it, which is that it's unfunded. All of this is going to cost money. The low estimate is that it's going to cost $40 million per biennium. $20 million a year. That's what the government claims it's going to cost. And we all know how great they are at estimating how expensive.
Did you say billion?
No, million. No, that would exceed that would double our state budget. Not that I'd be surprised. So, we're running low on time here. There are a couple points I want to make sure I get out before we into it. What can we do about this? How do we combat it? Some of you are aware that there was supposed to be a hearing this morning in the Finance Committee on this bill that has been kicked or referred back to the Education Committee. The buzz is they didn't want to hear from you. They didn't want to hear from the public on this because they've been hearing from the public on this. There are billboards up in these senators' districts letting them know that this is unacceptable. They're getting hundreds of phone calls on this topic, and they are scared. As well they should. But we need to continue turning up the heat. How do you do that? mnchildprotectionleague.com. mnchildprotectionleague.com. You can sign a petition if you haven't signed it already. You can read the bill, you can read the task force report, you can watch videos, you can contact your senator through their links.
You can hand out flyers to your neighbors.
Yes. Spread the word on this quickly, because this is coming to a head within the next week or so, the next couple of weeks. And I want to leave you with this point. So, we talked, when you came in, we talked about caring, right? Obviously, you guys don't care about kids. That's why you're here to question anti-bullying. What does it mean to care for somebody? What does it mean to have compassion? What does that actually look like? Martin Luther King Jr., in his famous I Have a Dream speech, delivered that popular line, often quoted, that he wants to live in a world where his children will be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin, right? Those who lay the strongest claim to Dr. King's legacy, if they were honest with themselves and honest with us, would admit that they're not for that. They're against that. They think that's a bad idea. Why? Because in order for you to judge someone by the content of their character, what is a prerequisite? What do you have to have?
Morality.
Liberty. You have to have the liberty to exercise your judgment, to determine character, to find it wanting, or to find it appropriate. And that runs directly against the agenda that's informing this bill. This is an anti-choice, anti-freedom, anti-liberty bill. And I reject the notion that you can purport to care about someone while taking their liberty from them. The objective of the education system ought to be, aside from just the objective goals of reading, writing, arithmetic, bringing children up with the capacity to conceive of and pursue those rational values which will sustain their life. To be adults, to survive in the world. This state has the worst achievement gap in the country. Minneapolis is graduating kids as low as 50%. And Governor Dayton's top priority at the moment is how they feel. It's immoral. And I think it goes to the point that it's not enough for conservatives to mosey on up behind the progressive and look over their shoulder, pop their head up over their shoulder and say, oh, we care about the kids too. Just like that guy, we care about the kids too. No. We care about the kids. They do not. We're the ones who care. We have a monopoly on compassion. You cannot claim to care when you place your personal, emotional, political agenda, whether it's informed by gay rights or your union dues, the size of your pension, tenure, whatever adult priority is being placed above the capacity of the child to conduct himself in the world. Don't tell me you care about the kids. You care about yourself and your own personal agenda. Let's fight that. Thank you.